Hello, welcome back. Part two here on Sheffield Live TV with Chris Turner, the former Sheffield Wednesday player and manager, and Brian Deane, the former Sheffield United striker. Leeds born and delighted in the glow of his two former clubs, doing so well, and both, Brian, being in the Premier League next season. I look forward to those games between the two. I reckon they're going to be very closely matched, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. Again, it comes down to, they're at two different sort of like times, really, where Sheffield United have kind of established themselves this season. But we talk about that second season situation where clubs sometimes struggle. And so they have got to recruit now. But everybody's aware of what they're doing, what they're capable of paying, etc. So that makes that job a lot more harder for them. But I think if you contrast that with the Leeds United, where people traditionally think of Leeds United as a top at least 10 club in the Premier League, their recruitment and negotiation is going to be tough as well, I think. Because nobody's going to fall for that. They know that it's a sleeping giant. But I think they also have to get that right because, players aren't cheap anymore. There are no nuggets out there that no one's heard of unless you've got specific inroads into certain markets. But then there's the settling in period. Some of those players that they've got, they will have maxed out in that division. But, hopefully the manager can continue to get a tune out of all the players, but it is going to be interesting. I can't wait for the game myself. I'll be watching it at home, no doubt.
Yeah. You're diplomatically staying away. It's going to be. It's almost hard for you, isn't it, when those two meet? Very hard.
Yeah. I think. I remember playing down the first time I played down at Leeds United as a Sheffield United player, and the atmosphere was so intimidating. And I remember I just wanted to beat them so much after that because I'd heard some horrendous stories about the crowd and so on and so on. And then, my first game for Leeds against Sheffield United, I go down to the Blades and we have a corner and I'm looking up into the crowd, and the season beforehand, I was looking up into the crowd and I could see the fans going, "Come on, Dino, let's have a go, let's have a go now." And then I'm looking up into the crowd thinking I've still got the same relationship with the fans, and they were like looking at me like they wanted to kill me. Do you know what I mean? But no, two brilliant clubs to play for. And I think the good thing about both of those clubs, and I suppose in football, the fans just want you to give 100%. And if you give them 100%, they can accept most things.
Yeah. And Chris, before we talk about Sheffield Wednesday again, your observations on what Leeds and Sheffield United have done. We've talked many times here about Chris Wilder, but Marcelo Bielsa sounds one incredible football manager to me.
Unbelievable. I watched the opening game of the season, not last season, but the season before. I think it was Stoke City. And I was watching that. And generally on Sunday afternoons, I take or leave it. Whoever's playing, take or leave it, who's on TV. But I sat down for 90 minutes and watched Leeds absolutely blow away Stoke City. And I thought, with that style of football and that commitment and that energy, Leeds are going to romp the league, not last season, season before. And unfortunately, they fell away at the end. And then last season, they've got promotion. I think it's going to be a great addition. Since then, I've read one or two books and one or two articles from various managers, Pochettino being one, who absolutely adore and worship Bielsa as a teacher of football and as a manager. And in Argentina, he's God. And I think he's God in Leeds now. And I think Leeds will be like Sheffield United. I think they'll take the division by storm. And I think they'll have no problems next season. And I think they'll be good to watch even in the Premier League. I think the Premier League, and I think Sheffield United proved it. You don't go in there fearing teams. Obviously, you have to be more guarded against your Liverpools and the boys at the top. But I think in general, I think you can go and attack teams and surprise teams, and if you're organised and you're working hard and you got your tactics right, you can do what Sheffield United's done. And I think Leeds might, Sheffield United's been exceptional, but I think Leeds will be like mid-table and stay up there.
Do you agree with that, Brian?
I do. I mean, look, the way how they play is brilliant to watch. I've seen them. I think it was Hull at one of the games towards the end of last season, and the way how the movement of the players. These players are learning all the time from this guy about their positional sense. What runs to make, where to play the ball, and so on. And I look at a lot of the teams in the Premier League, and they're just tired. They're just happy to be there. There's nothing. You're not getting anything fresh by watching them. I won't mention any names, but Leeds will be like a breath of fresh air next season, and the fans will be right behind them. I think you couldn't have asked for a better club to join the Premier League than Leeds United, with a manager who's got that kind of charisma. Like Chris said, he's worshipped by all of the top guys, like the Pochettinos of this world, Pep Guardiola. These guys sort of like look at him, and it's really refreshing to bring in somebody like him. Even for me, an ex-player, to think that somebody like Marcelo Bielsa is the manager of the local club here is amazing, and the fans must be, they're on cloud nine. I know that because everywhere you go, everybody talks about this guy, and they'll put a statue outside the club for him. I'm telling you, you watch.
Would you have liked to have played for him? I mean, it's very intense apparently. It's his way or no way at all. The physical demands are huge, but you take all that, Brian, just to play that sort of ball.
Yeah, definitely. I think people. I mean, I played in a Leeds team with some real athletes, and I mean, Carlton Palmer was one. Carlton's probably one of the fittest guys I've ever met and played with. We had a team that ran all over teams when we qualified for Europe, with Tony Yeboah and, the Rod Wallaces, Gary Speeds, all of these kind of players, Tony DeRigo, Gary Kelly. And, that was one thing we were good at. And what people don't realise is when you're fit, you become more confident on the pitch, because you can keep doing it, and you can actually see at times when you're grinding down teams and you're getting stronger towards the end of games, and it's really euphoric. I used to love all that. I used to love being really fit, and this guy, from what I'm told, he's a monster when it comes to fitness. But I think a lot of players, the right players, embrace that. So yeah, I would have loved to have played under him, definitely.
Entertainment wise as well, the Premier League can be a bit chess-like, Chris Turner, at times, and can be quite ponderous. But the way Sheffield United have attacked it, and you alluded this to earlier, and Leeds will attack it, it's going to make it an even better place to watch football, isn't it?
Most definitely. I think that Chris Wilder, Bielsa, play a style of football that people like to watch. Coaching and Premiership football has been more about possession and trying to pass the ball, trying to pass the other team, or possession them to death without the ball, to then create a few chances a game, hopefully take one of them, and then keep more possession. And I think, the two teams, Leeds and Sheffield United, are completely the opposite. Yeah, they'll keep the ball, but they'll play with a zip, and they'll get the ball into the strikers in and around, and they'll back it, they'll support it. At Sheffield United, you've got the flying centre-halves coming around the outside, putting crosses in, creating chances, saves, missed chances. That's what people want to watch. That's what I want to watch as a football supporter. And I can't understand why most managers don't want to play that way. And and get people off the seats to as Brian said earlier, go home happy, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah. I'm thinking parallel as well, Brian, is they both prove that you can score goals and entertain without necessarily having prolific strikers.
No, and that's, if you look at both teams kind of focus on a lot of movement in the final third. And that's, like you said, different people are coming in and scoring. And I just think, we got to a point in the Premier League where, like Chris said, teams will kind of sit deep. I call it a poor man's type of Man City football. So whoever's at the top, you'll get coaches and managers coming in trying to replicate that on a budget, and it's terrible to watch for me. We always used to say, well, okay, we might not have a chance against the Manchester Uniteds, the Liverpools under Dave Bassett. So we used to just go out and attack them. And you know what? I think we did very well against those sides because if we lost, we lost, But if a lot of the times those teams didn't want to play against us, and they were used to the kind of attack against defence games, and we didn't give them that. And it actually kind of gives it makes the players more accountable for their performances. And I think a lot of players like to step up and perform in those situations rather than being told, well, we've got to get 10 behind the ball, and we've got, when the ball goes out there, we've got to tuck in on the opposite side. And it's nonsense as a player. You want to go out there and express yourself.
And another thing as well, both Leeds and Sheffield United have, is a clear and very strong sense of identity in the way that they play, which is, dare I say, completely lacking at the moment, Chris, at Hillsborough.
Well, I think Carlos had a bit of an identity in the first 18 months of his reign there. And then Sheffield Wednesday slipped into that, passing all over the field. Maybe it's because they haven't got a lot of pace in the team at the time and could hit teams on a quick counter-attack. And I think that's, a great thing to have in your squad is players with pace. And Wednesday have lacked pace. And I'm hoping that an identity can be formed this summer to play pretty similar to what we've just been describing, Brian and I, at Hillsborough, to get off to a winning start and getting the sort of identity that wins football matches and gets people excited. And I think it's very important, as I said before on your programmes, Alan, recruitment's vital. I'm pleased to see they've brought somebody in quite quickly, a young player from Manchester City. But I'm hoping that there's a list of players that Garry Monk's got, and they're coming through the door as quickly as possible so that they can get them together and start to form something to get, obviously, to try and reclaim as many of those minus 12 points as quickly as they can in the season. But if we have a summer, which is very, very short this year, but if we have a summer of waiting, dragging on and not getting deals over the line, and then suddenly a week before we get a one here and one there, I'm afraid we're going to get much of the old same as what we've just had.
Where do you stand on Garry Monk? Because a lot of supporters, well, certainly the more voluble ones, have made it quite clear that they want a change of manager. I think that quite a large number of the silent majority fully understand that Garry Monk hasn't had an opportunity yet to put his stamp on the job. So where do you stand on him, Chris, as a former Wednesday manager yourself?
We've got to have some stability at the club. And if Garry Monk is going to be the manager next season, then please, Chairman, let him get on with his job. Let him go and get some of his own backroom staff in. Let him get the players he wants to bring in and give him a chance. And if he doesn't want Garry Monk as manager, do it nice and early. Bring in another manager in and give him the opportunity, what I've just said, he needs to give to Garry. We can't have
what
this.
Would you do?
Sorry?
What would you do? What would you do of those two things?
That's a $50 million question, Alan. I've said before, and I've pushed forward before, Paul Cook. Paul Cook would play the football at Hillsborough that the crowd like. He wins matches. His record is excellent at Chesterfield, Portsmouth, Wigan, and in the Championship last season. He was a top 3 manager since Christmas with results, and he's a character, as you know, Alan, and he brings charisma. And if he's allowed to manage, he will get Sheffield Wednesday out of the Championship into the Premier League. I'd put my life on it. That's my opinion.
Back Gary Monk, or if you're not going to, Paul Cook would be the guy.
I would get Paul Cook. And you've got to be realistic. I've seen some of the managers that people are putting forward. Come on, they ain't going to come to Hillsborough under the present regime and the present thing that's happening. Let's be realistic. Paul Cook's a manager that has developed players and had great success in the Championship this season with Wigan, beat Manchester City in cup games. It'd be a revelation for the club, and the fans would love him. I can assure you of that. And, you know, if Garry's given a chance and he doesn't do well, then, you know, further down the line, if Paul's still available. But he's available today. Paul Cook's available today. But once again, going right back to the very first question on this programme today, you've got to have somebody in there that can say to the chairman, he's the man for us, let's go and get him. There's nobody, I don't think.
So don't you think, for me, don't you think this is where you need a director of football? You need an identity down there. You need almost like you could canvass the fans and say, look, what kind of football do you want to play for the next 10 years? And get, you know, the right infrastructure in place to say, right, this is the type of football we're going to play. We're not going to deviate from that. And you know what? Anybody who comes in as an interview, that's what they have to produce. Otherwise, they're out. But then you also have to have a lot of the recruitment and so on club owned. I mean, when I was in Norway, that's how it was, and that's how it is in Europe, you know. And I think it's almost like crisis management down there now. But you have to have a long-term strategy, otherwise you're just going to keep stumbling from pillar to post. You know, stop. You know, I get sick of all of this perception, you know, in the press about this guy and that guy. Like you said, you know. I totally agree with you, by the way, about Paul Cook. I think he's a fantastic manager. I remember him down at Chesterfield. You know, I think Garry Monk is in situ at the moment, and I think that they've got to back him. If they don't back him, then they need to act quickly because things will change very quickly. But, you know, they need to get that infrastructure in place because without that, the club's just going to drift like a ship out to sea, you know?
I agree. Totally agree, Brian. Totally agree.
Yeah, and much as we have full respect, I think everybody does, to the commitment and the financing and the fact that his heart is in the right place from Dapon Chansiri, even 5 years involved in football is, in my opinion, not long enough, you know, to learn enough for what is a really
important decisions. And at every club, the supporters are the most important people, in my opinion. They are the most important people. They are the people that will stay with the club long after an owner, manager, player has come and gone. The supporter, that's their club. That's their lifeline. That's everything. And for a long time now, the fans have been disenchanted with what's happening at the club. And we can't hide away from the fact, and I don't like talking that way, but the fans, I think if the results would have been the same that we've just had over the last 10 games, Hillsborough wouldn't have been a good place to be playing for manager or players or owner, because they would have been informed of how they feel. And quite rightly so, for what they've seen and what they've watched and what's been happening in and around the club. And to end it with a -12 at the end of the season, I think that's not the icing on the cake, but I think that's the thing that's really tipped the scales. And Garry will have to get off to a flying start, I believe, next season to regain the confidence of a majority of the supporters.
Your thoughts, Brian, on Garry Monk? I don't know if he's somebody that you know well. I mean, he's packed a lot of experience. Only 40, but he's packed a lot of experience in. I think Sheffield Wednesday is his 5th club. And let's be fair to him, he did very well at Swansea in his first job. Pretty respectable, I thought, at Leeds, nearly in the playoffs. And also at Birmingham, under the cosh there, with, funnily enough, a points deduction. And everybody speaks very highly of the job he did there. So are we being fair entirely to Garry Monk, Brian, do you think?
To be honest, I don't know Garry. I mean, obviously, he's got a good CV. He's got a good resume of clubs that he's certainly used to going into the club the size of Sheffield Wednesday and doing a good job. So, you know, I'm sure that he's now planning with those 12 points in mind. And if it means that he has to look for quick wins, this is going to be a real test for him. And you know, if he does well and he comes out of it, if he gets those 12 points back, and Sheffield Wednesday finish comfortably in mid-table, you know, his CV goes up. If the players come back, they're not motivated, and you know they end up sort of like struggling at the bottom of the table. It's a real kind of, you know, for somebody who's had those kind of jobs, he's in a real situation now where, you know, it can go one way or another for his career. I mean, he's had a lot of opportunities, so we're going to find out exactly what he's about now.
Yeah, one thing you can say as well for Deane Chansiri, much as I agree that the club's situation and turmoil is very much at his door and he needs to learn from that. And I think depart from the policies that he's had and rely on football expertise and take a back seat. I agree and believe all of that and have for some time. You have to say he is loyal to his managers. The managers he's selected, he's been as loyal as you possibly could be to them. That is, I think, a positive, Chris, that we have to allow.
I mean, look, I want to make it clear. I don't want to see Garry Monk lose his job. I want Garry Monk to keep his job, but be able to manage his job. And if Garry can come out and say, I'm making all the decisions, I'm signing the players, I'm releasing the players, and everything like that, I think that would clear the path or clear the way for a lot of people's thinking. You're correct. I think that the chairman has backed and supported his managers in terms of length, but as he supported the managers in the past with the decisions that those managers wanted to make. I mean, Carlos has come out and said he didn't sign the players in the first season, who actually were the better players that were signed. But you know,
I find it really hard to believe that the manager doesn't. And I know it's fact. I know what you're talking about, and it's true. But I can't believe that somebody like Garry Monk, who's, you know, he's been a player, he's been a manager, he has good experience in football, can't be left alone to actually pick the side and point the club in the direction that he thinks best. It just shows you how egos operate in football, to think that you can just sort of like decide by watching a game in the stand that this person should be playing on, bringing that type of player in. There's so many layers to understanding what a player is like when you're bringing him in. There's characteristics. There's, you know, what's he like away from football? You know, what's he like in the changing rooms? You know, what's he like under pressure? You know, what is he a family man? All of these things should go into the recruitment process, not just kind of some people turning up who the manager don't want and then integrating into a side. It's madness. I mean, there's no wonder.
Well, Brian, that's where we are today and why over the last 5 years. That's what's been going off.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. And it's where we are.
And it's been one of Chris Wilder and Sheffield United's immense strengths that they have looked into.
Sheffield United got the best recruitment guy in the game in Paul Mitchell, in my eyes.
Who you used to work with at Chesterfield. I wish he was now. Yeah. We really do.
So, you know, but I can't tell you who the recruitment guy is at Sheffield Wednesday.
No. Well, let's just finish back on a happy note at Sheffield United and just further the conversation that Brian started earlier on about how this system has worked so well for 2 or 3 years and how teams have not been able to combat it, but how you feel that Chris Wilder, a man you know well, will try and maybe tinker with it just to give people something to think about next year and to surprise them again. How might he do that, do you think?
Are you asking Brian?
Brian first, and then...
Okay, yeah.
I think whatever Chris does, he has to make sure that he keeps the tempo up. You know, I think that it's a good system. You know, you've got Eddie McGoldrick, but by him dropping deep, it gives them an opportunity to overload the midfield areas, and so they don't get overrun by teams, which I think is fantastic. But I think pace is you can't win anything without pace. I'm sorry. If you don't have pace, you don't have tempo, and it's so easy for teams to kind of counteract. So I think that Chris has got to look at to build on what he's got. I think he's got to look at pace wherever he recruits, pace and strength and mobility. For me, those are the three keys. Once you get up in that top division, you have to have those in abundance, because that's how you can compete with teams on a base level. You know, you just need that. And I suppose if you're buying players at that level, that technically they're going to be good players anyway, or that you're gonna develop them further. I mean, you look at the boy Musetto. I think I've seen things where I don't know if he's going or whatever, but you know they've had him at the club for a season, and if he does go, they'll get their money back. You know, most definitely, he scored some fantastic goals and shown that he can play at the top level. So it just means that, like you say, Paul Mitchell has got to go out now and find the next best thing to that, you know? And it's got to be... Sorry, I'm just going to say a gradual evolution then.
Yeah, and with a relatively limited budget, and I noticed from comments, I interpreted from Chris Wilder's comments, he's prepared to wheel and deal a bit, because, you know, he's not going to have the power to buy 2 or 3 ready-made Premier League players, presumably, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, you know, he's going to have to look at the squad, and he's going to have to think perhaps, you know, who's going to be able to make the next step, you know, and, you know, some of the players' values will have gone up this season, no doubt, you know,
yeah.
and it might be a case of, well, if one of the top clubs comes in for one of his players, he might have to forego that player to be able to bring in somebody else who will do a better job next season.
Yeah, that's exactly the column that I've written actually this week.
Right,
Chris, yeah, great minds, as I say. Chris, just finally to you. You know, looking forward to next season. It can only get better. It really can get better. There's an opportunity in the midst of this. There's some positives here. Whoever signs for Sheffield Wednesday this summer is going to really genuinely want to play for them.
Well, I think that's the recruitment strategy that they must have, and especially with the position that we're starting in. And I think that you know, hopefully a line can be drawn under everything that we've mentioned and that has been mentioned from now onwards, and that we start to recruit and get a team and a squad of players, as you say, Alan, and as what Brian mentioned earlier regarding the siege mentality, and getting that togetherness and that team spirit back into the club that sadly has been lacking. And, you know, with the players that we've already got there of some quality, and build some pace into that team and start off with a couple of wins, and then I think you'll see the improvement. But we have to draw the line under it, and the owner has to, and he's got to get everybody back on his side.
Indeed. Chris Turner, Brian Deane, thanks so much for breaking into your summer staycations to join us. It's been a fantastic hour or so. A real pleasure to talk to you. I'm really most grateful. And to you for